I'm Rachel Alexandria Arnold. I was executive producer and past Tammy Taylor for Stab 4. Tammy Taylor went to high school with Sarah Campbell. She was bullied and she really enjoyed getting revenge to the point of insanity. Stab 4 was obviously the very first film we ever made. It was interesting because we started it because we were bored. We were kids in New Hampshire that had nothing to do, and we decided we were going to write a cheesy horror movie. And we may have broken into Josh's mom's house while they were on vacation and filmed it there, which we later paid for, but it was a really fun experience. We were there for probably a week, if not more, straight. The camaraderie was great because it was a bunch of friends that were literally just doing it for fun. It wasn't any sort of production, and we never ever expected it to reach the heights that it did. We kind of posted it on YouTube as a joke, and I remember having a call with Josh and him saying, you know, we have 5,000 views on this, and we were like, okay, cool. And then it kind of exploded, thanks to everyone watching for that. There are a lot of really cool memories for Stab 4 because it was our first one. For instance, we filmed on an old flip camera, but they're really low quality because, again, this was just for fun. We had lighting issues. We really learned everything we know about movies. The whole learning process started with Stab 4 on what not to do. We had exterior lighting that was run on a battery, and so much of the movie was written outside. Thank you, Josh. And I was literally just originally along for the ride. I wanted to be in the background. He came to me and said, hey, I'm gonna do this movie. I'm bored. Let's, you know, create something. I'm like, sure, as long as I don't have to be on camera. And he said to me, well, that's interesting because I wrote you a cameo. I was told that I could play this crazy person, which I was all for, obviously, because I don't consider myself an actress, even to this day. I really still don't consider myself an actress. I can read lines and try and put some emotion to them, and some people say that's acting, but I don't feel like I'm an actress. So I enjoyed that a lot, and probably Stab 4 was one of my favorites just because it not only was it our first one, we learned a ton. Everybody there just had a lot of fun. Very little issues with actors or actresses. There were some, as there are with any production, but it was probably the most seamless of all of our movies. So shout out to everybody who watched Stab 4 and allowed us to go on this crazy journey that is still not ending. We're still working on new things for you, so thank you. Josh wrote the script, right? Like he came to me saying that he wanted to create this after the script was already written, but he said that there were some holes that he hadn't finished and some flashback scenes, and he actually gave me the opportunity to write them. So I wrote every single one of those flashback scenes. But the funny part about this is I was not there for every single one of the filmings of these flashback scenes. So I had no idea what they were gonna look like. I think he did an excellent job. It was awesome for the very first time ever that I got to watch people act out something I had written and make it come to life, which was really cool. I think over the 10 years, it's been 10 years, my goodness, the 10 years that we've done this, I've developed many different roles in the movies, but one that has kind of stayed consistent is I'm cast mom. This definitely started in Stab 4. We were stuck in a house. We really, though we didn't stay there overnight, we basically were there overnight. And I was charged with kind of corralling everybody and keeping them on script and running lines with them, and that's where this started. And it was a lot of fun. It may not have continued to be a lot of fun throughout the next couple of productions, but for the first one, for the most part, it was fun. And I kid, because even though we had issues in the next productions, it still was a lot of fun to bond with everybody and see what people were bringing to the table. So let's talk about Josh's character's death scene. We probably filmed that in so many takes. It was ridiculous. We could not get the blood to be the right color. I know that this is something so simple, but literally every time he spit up and went down the cabinet doors, it was pink. He was spitting pink. And watch it, go back and watch it, you will see it is pink. And there was nothing that we could do. Everybody else's death was fine. Doobies, we spilled the blood, yes, but it was still red. Of course, for Josh's characters, it's bright pink. We did have issues with people taking longer than they should have because they wouldn't listen. From Stab 5 on out, we would have this intro meeting with people and say, hey, Josh is bad cop, Rachel's good cop. If you listen to Rachel, you don't have to deal with Josh. And that is because of Stab 4, because I don't know how many times I would say, hey guys, quiet on set, or hey, go here and run your lines so that you're ready. And none of it was listened to. And then one day Josh had an epic meltdown and basically told everyone off and said, you know, Rachel's here to help you out and you're not listening to her, you're not respecting her, and she's just trying to help you be better, get through your scenes quickly so that we can all go home. And so from there on out, every single time we had a production, it didn't matter if it was a short movie, if it was a full-fledged picture, that's how we started everything. So that goes back to Cast Mom and how it started. And people started to learn. I sugarcoat things, I guess is the best way to say it. And even if someone's really irritating me, it takes a lot longer for that to like come outward, not for Josh. I think many of our fans and viewers can probably sense that already, so I don't think that that's a secret. But for me, it takes a lot. So if I am melting down, there's a problem. And people started to learn because I got to that part, but not in Stab 4. So yeah, that was probably the most challenging part about Stab 4, aside from filming things and learning how to film things. So I remember when we were done Stab 4 finally, and I watched it and I was like, this is terrible. Not gonna lie, it's terrible. I appreciate everybody who watches it, but it was awful. But I think it needed to be awful because we learned what not to do to keep moving forward. And I think that that's true of every movie. Every movie I watch is a little bit less terrible, but still terrible until we get probably to 6 or 7, because I'm starting to see everything that we've learned really pay off. So even though to me, Stab 4 is like the black sheep of everything we've done, as far as filming quality, I think it was necessary, and it's really what made this whole journey possible. So thank you for watching it and not thinking it was terrible, or thinking it was terrible and still watching it. I appreciate it because you're the reason that we're still here. Hi, I'm Rachel Alexandria Arnold, and I play Rachel Alexandria Arnold in Stab 5, and I was executive producer as well. So my character in Stab 5 is an exaggerated version of myself, and a lot of my character echoes what's going on in real life. Even though I know Josh will not agree with this, I play his assistant in the movie, and that's kind of what was happening in real life too. But you see a lot of growth happen. I started very meager and timid and took a lot of the bad behavior from Josh's character, and by the end I end up quitting. I have had enough. I decide that I'm, you know, worth more, that my mental health is worth more, and decide that that's not a good situation for me, and I quit. So it was interesting to, one, as I've said before, not considering myself an actress, to try and act, but also to act almost 2 separate characters, because I start one way and end a completely stronger version of who I was playing. So it was a lot of fun. It was challenging and interesting, but Rachel in Stab 5 is probably my favorite because she suffers no fools by the end of that movie. And that's what starts, I guess, my ascend to being Stab Queen. There's so many memories I have of Stab 5. We get introduced to Veronica, played by Ariel. And Josh has always been really, really great about making characters fit for people. So like my character was an exaggerated form of myself. Veronica was definitely a version of Ariel, which is cool. And so many others. But it was fun to see characters really custom written for the actors and actresses that played. So that was the first really cool thing that was exciting. We had a new camera that Karen bought for us, so we were working with better equipment. We had more knowledge. We had a larger cast, some that actually had experience. So Stab 5 was really exciting for us. It was a really, really exciting time. We get introduced to Chris O'Brockie and his character Derek, who plays, you know, the staff, basically the film staff. I don't know if he was a grip or sound, but he's in the background, but not, because we're filming a movie that includes them, which was interesting. We're shifting now into reality, so it was interesting because we had to film things that would happen normally, like you would normally see a filming crew, but we had to actually put it on camera in a movie, which felt very fake and awkward at times. And that might read a little bit in the movie about how we were gonna position things. I remember looking at a scene and being like, but does this feel real? Because it doesn't feel real to film it. So we had to edit a lot of that. There were so many challenges. We filmed in the wintertime in New Hampshire, which, whose idea was that? and there was snow and ice involved. I remember Karen in her death scene, she literally was in the snow in her front yard. It had snowed that night and she was dying in the snow. And I don't think I've ever felt so badly for one of our cast members, because she is the sweetest thing, and she was a champ and she never complained. Everybody else was like, are you really okay? Do you swear you're okay? Because you're making me cold just watching you. And she powered through it. Shout out to Karen, we love you. So funny story from Stab 5, we filmed in a parking garage that we didn't have permission to be in. We went after hours to a bank parking garage and just kind of hoped it would work out. It did. At one point there were security guards that walked by us and we were mid-kill, if you will, and they just kind of looked at us and kept walking. I don't know if they realized it was a movie because they saw the camera, or if they were just like, not today, but they walked right past us. My car that I owned at the time was a Chevy Cobalt, I believe. It was gold, and they had a recall on the springs and the door mechanisms would not allow the back doors to close because they were actually plastic springs. They weren't metal. And so, not even in the movie, but like throughout our entire friendship that I own this car, I had a sign like in the window that said, do not open door, don't unlock. And we were so good about it. And this night we weren't. So after filming in the middle of winter in a freezing cold parking garage that we weren't supposed to be in, Derek's character was on the ground. Ariel was running around the levels of the parking garage. We went to go home and Josh forgot that we're not supposed to open that door, and we actually couldn't close my door. So we spent so much time. I had to call my brother, shout out to Chris, who nobody ever sees anything about the movies because he's not involved, but he helped us more in Stab 5, I think, than he will ever know, because the movie would not have gone forward if we could not have gotten home. He came out and fixed my door temporarily. And I believe one more time that happened, even though it shouldn't have, because we should have remembered after how terrible that night was. But that was our interesting story. One of our huge, just like life happens challenges from the movies. There's so many in these movies, and I hope that in these videos you guys get to see what really goes into making them, because it's not just that like life happens for one person, life happens for every single actor, and we all feel the experience of that, because without one, there's none. Side note, if you're watching carefully when we drive away, because the door would not physically close, the door is actually open as we drive off. So if you watch it again, that'll be a fun fact and a fun thing for you to catch. Some other obstacles that we ran into were, I would say, cast fatigue. I think the more we film and the later we film, people just forget common sense, and that's not me picking on them, it just happens. You just get exhausted. You've done the same scene over and over again, and so you start to lose common sense because you're just tired. And so that played a big part in some of the challenges that we faced in Stab 5 as well. Amanda Constant got her hand cut because we told her a million times to make sure her hands were secure and away from the blade, and she was so exhausted that she just reacted and put her hand up and sliced her finger. She needed stitches. It was this whole thing. The same thing happened with Alex. Alex got his chin sliced. Steve, still remember how terribly Steve felt. Steve actually sliced his chin on accident. So those are some of like the physical exhaustion things that happen and the problems that are created from that. Some of the other challenges that we experienced in Stab 5 is because it was the first time we had a new cast, and it wasn't just that we were doing it for fun, it's that we were honestly trying to start creating content, was that we had a cast that had some experience, and with that came what I call the idea train. It's interesting to see how many people want to put on a director's cap when they are making a movie, and so many people, while we were trying to get scenes filmed, would throw in ideas, and that would just delay it. And we started just kind of entertaining them and trying to be polite, and then realized we quickly had to draw a line in the sand and say, hey, the movie's already written, it doesn't need any edits, we're gonna film from here on out. I know that happened in the scene where I'm getting my makeup done, or I'm doing makeup rather, and there's a singing scene. There were so many people throwing out ideas on what song they wanted to sing, which was interesting because I was the one that was supposed to be singing, not them. and they just, you know, wanted to hop on board, and it just kind of became this mess that took far longer than it should have. The end product was great, so glad that we got there. So this just gives you an idea of the delays and the challenges that we faced, and even though, you know, the end product was great, we recovered from it. It really started to teach us about how we were going to have to approach certain things, like, you know, the script not needing edits, and though it's great to take ideas from people, there needs to be a boundary. And so that was a learning thing for Josh and myself as well. And to this day, we've put it into practice, and we'll take some ideas and examples at the beginning, and then that's kind of over so that we can keep moving. So in Stab 5, we also get introduced to Mandy's character, Dylan. Mandy is super sweet, one of the nicest people I've ever worked with, but she was definitely a challenge to work with. I think maybe there was once that she came that she kind of knew her lines and was ready to go, but she took a lot of coaching, which honestly, it's okay. It was great practice, but when everybody else knows their lines and you don't, it is a little frustrating to watch everybody else get, you know, kind of irritated by it. So that was challenging, so love her. And I know that at some point we kept trying to kind of write her out of movies because of that challenge, but the fans loved her so much that we couldn't. We had to keep putting her in movies because that's what you wanted to see. So that is our commitment to you, is even though it was challenging for us, we kept putting her in because you asked for her. Remember in Stab 5, one of the new things that we had to work on is it's the first time we had to do real location scouting, even though throughout all of the Stab movies, there's this inside joke that it's always at Josh's apartment. You see them everywhere. You see that orange mirror and the red couch, like you see it all. And we've tried to disguise it in many ways throughout the movies, but it remains. But for Stab 5, there were some things that we just could not do from Josh's apartment. And one of those was a fortune teller scene. We needed to find a place that would be believable. And so I remember I went looking and I scoured and I found Myth and Maidens, which is in Manchester, New Hampshire. It's a great little shop. And they had a basement, which we weren't even aware of. And they gracefully let us come and film there. But ironically, again, like the flashbacks in Stab 4, even though I wrote the flashbacks and I wasn't there, I found Myth and Maidens, never saw the inside of it, was not there for filming at all. So everybody else got to kind of check it out and have fun. And to this day, I still have never stepped foot inside of Myth and Maidens. Not because I haven't wanted to, just because I haven't done it yet. So in Stab 5, we get introduced to Stephanie, who plays Shannon. Shannon was originally cast by someone actually named Shannon that got into a car accident, so we had to replace her. She was pretty badly injured. So we casted Steph, and I remember from the first day that she was on set, I was in absolute awe. She was fun and energetic, sometimes too much, but she acted amazingly. And I remember just watching her act in some of her scenes and actually being terrified of her, whether it be something that she was doing where she was scared or if it was just normal. It was just on all the time. Steph was probably one of my favorite people of Stab 5 because that was the first time that we had somebody that was so experienced, and it was really, really fun to watch. So in short, Stab 5 was stage 2 of the Stab movies process. We learned a lot in Stab 4 that we brought to Stab 5, but we learned even more in Stab 5 that we brought to Stab 6. And so it's an important film for us, and I really enjoyed making it. Hi, I'm Rachel Alexandria Arnold, and I was assistant director, executive producer, and I played Rachel Alexandria Arnold in Stab 6. So in Stab 6, the character of Rachel gets an upgrade. I call her Rachel 2.0 because she quit at the end of Stab 5, and she's decided that now that Josh is dead, she's gonna kind of take over. And she does so with a lot of determination and grace that we haven't seen from that character before. So aside from the character development in Stab 6, personally, in real life, I got development too. In the opening scene where Laura and Adam die, I actually handled a lot of the camera work. And we filmed in an actual house, not in a set, so we had the challenge of filming around, you know, walls and stairs and doors and trying to get good shots. Especially, I remember Adam's was probably a little easier to film in that regard, but Laura's was very difficult. Her scene in the stairs and her dying in the stairs was probably one of the most physically challenging things to film. I think I was bent over upside down, like laying down the stairs backwards so that I could get an appropriate angle of Laura, and I honestly wish that there was footage of it because it had to be hysterical to watch. I had to keep shifting, and I literally was hanging upside down to film. And so it was a lot of growth for me outside of my character too. After they die, of course, I go to bring their characters I believe it was a wedding present, and then we run into the Kylie Scott character played by Heidi. She obviously has been in a production before, but really just cameos, and this is where she gets her real day, I would say. Rachel's character starts writing her own version of Stab 5 because it was never finished in the actual Stab 5. And so between Kylie and Rachel, we decide to create a reality TV show to cast the movie based on the script that I am writing. That was a new concept for us. It was sort of like Inception, because it was reality filming reality filming reality. And I just remember you kind of get lost in those layers when you're filming. You don't remember, okay, is this, you know, my character's first reality, or is this the reality TV show? And so that was always very interesting. We have an enormous group of out-of-staters that physically travel to us. It wasn't just from Massachusetts. Of course, we see Chris from Maryland come back, but we also see Kwame and Fred come from New York City. We see Ashley come from Maryland. So this is the first movie where we've had so many people come out, and that brought its own set of challenges. One of the challenging things about having so many people from out of state is time restrictions. So for Stab 4, we filmed it in like 2 weeks. It was a fun project. In Stab 5, we kind of had the time that we needed to take to make sure that we were able to put everything, you know, into the movie that we really felt needed to be there and take as much time as we needed to film. But for Stab 6, we didn't have that ability. We can't keep the out-of-staters for months at a time. This is not, you know, a professional production. They're not paid actors. They came and spent their own money, and we can't keep them, you know, for longer than they already had committed. So that really pushed us, and it taught us more. Like, every movie teaches us something, but that was a huge lesson for us. There was a lot that happened in Stab 6 that was great. We were in Karen's house. She was, you know, nice enough to let us film so much of the movie there. That's where all of the reality TV show happened. And what was cool about Heidi and Rachel's characters is really until the end we were perceived as good people. And you kind of see at the end that Rachel had this idea to just kind of shove a bunch of people into a confined environment where they weren't allowed out. And she did that not because she really wanted to create a show, but because she wanted chaos to happen. This is kind of where she starts going a little crazy. She's never unintelligent though. She always knows what's going on, but you see she kind of becomes devious, and she wants chaos to happen so that she gets the best shots. She wants, you know, the deaths to happen. She's hoping that there's a killer amongst the mix so that, you know, it'll make great TV. So that's a really interesting side of Rachel's character in Stab 6. She kind of starts to unravel, but never so much that she loses control. Stab 6, it's contrasting in so many ways to Stab 5. In Stab 5, we thought we had, you know, for Stab 6, we thought we had learned our lesson in Stab 5, where we filmed in the winter, and, you know, that had its own challenges and problems. We thought, you know, we'll film in the summer, it'll be great. No. You can't film with AC. Air conditioning makes so much noise that we were already having audio issues that we literally could not film a single scene with the AC on. So I remember sometimes we would turn the AC on and then sneak into an area that was AC'd and then turn it off. But there was this huge room on the second floor of Karen's house that was like a playroom, and that's where everybody kind of waited to film their scenes, and it was boiling hot in there. And so now we have cranky actors that are sweating. I don't know how many, there's probably in the bloopers of me literally like wiping my melting makeup off. Not only are people cranky, but they're tired because the heat's making them tired. People are getting jittery, they're forgetting their lines. So even though we thought we had fixed the problem, we actually created a whole new one. Filming of Stab 6 was so crazy. It probably was the most fun because we were, again, it felt like Stab 4, we were stuck in a house. And we kind of had to bond. So Stab 6 was fun, even though it wasn't a lot of fun, if that makes sense. So for me, the most fun death scene of Stab 6 to film was definitely Nicole Ward's character, Tamra. It's the first time that we really played with doing something other than normal stabbing. We gutted her. And it took forever for us to find intestines that looked real enough to be in the movie. Because of course we're very low budget. We're paying for everything out of our own pockets. You know, we have just normal jobs. We're not, you know, independently rich. So we finally found some that were good cost. They looked great. And I still remember to this day, we had to pre-soak them and they were just sitting in my sink at home. And so everybody, you know, that lived in my house would walk by and just see intestines soaking in my sink. And then we would dip them in blood. And they got like the weirdest texture and they felt real and it was just gross. And I remember Nicole Ward wanted to jump rope with them. And Karen had actually told us when we started filming in her house that we were allowed to get blood anywhere but in the kitchen, which we'll talk about that later. But we still, you know, we wanted to be respectful. The end scene or the death scenes at the end, the big showdown left a ton of blood in the basement and that's a cement floor. It's not something that we can get up. So we still were trying to be respectful. So we told her she couldn't jump rope, but I'm pretty sure there's some outtakes of her like starting to jump rope and then realizing it wasn't really a good idea. But I remember we put different layers of shirts on and brought the intestines through so it looked like she was being gutted, and it was gross, but also really, really fun. So in Stab 6, aside from us doing the gut scene, it's also the first time that for throat slits we started using piping or tubing to squirt blood out, and so that was interesting to learn how to do. I remember so many times the tube would, you know, fall out and completely fall out of the actor's clothing and start squirting, and we were getting it everywhere, or you know, somebody would be holding onto it and by the time the blood started to squirt it would be so slippery that it, you know, the whole tube would slip. It was a mess. So I would say Stab 6 is probably marked by, you know, blood tubes is the most vivid memory I have. Kwame brought so much to his character, it was crazy. He had ideas that just never stopped, and when we opened it up to people in the beginning to kind of get out their ideas, literally everything Kwame said that he wanted to bring to his character was genius, and we let it happen. He was never written, you know, in the nerdy way that he portrayed the character, but it brought so much to that character that even though it might have felt like he was really just kind of an ensemble actor, he brought himself to the forefront because of that. So props to Kwame, and props to letting our new process work of allowing people to kind of input without ruining the flow of the filming. Another thing that we did in Stab 6 that we hadn't really done in the first two that we made is we started really being secretive about the ending. We wrote the ending but would not allow anybody but Josh or I or the people involved in the ending to see the script. Like everybody else that got a script, that wasn't in their script, so they had no idea, and the cast was constantly trying to guess. What was interesting is Fred's character, Chasen, was one of the killers, and obviously, like I've stated, Fred and Kwame in real life were friends. They lived together in New York City, and Fred managed to make it out before production of the whole movie even started to film the ending scene without Kwame realizing where he was going. And so he and Kara, who played Hayden, filmed this scene before the whole movie got filmed. So the ending was done way before the rest of the movie was filmed. Donna in the end scene was amazing also. She had no acting experience and she really got into it. She was so fun to watch because she was so excited. And I still to this day remember she has this part where she, if you watch it, she pushes Kylie Scott, you know, Heidi's character. And the first or the second time she did it, she tripped on the way in to do it. And she pushed her so hard that Heidi actually like flew, like literally got air and flew into a metal filing cabinet. And I will never forget the sound of the thud it made watching, you know, this little 100-pound blonde girl just fly into metal. And I remember how badly Donna felt about it. Of course, at first everyone's reaction is, oh my gosh, are you okay? Followed by immediate outbursts of laughter from everyone, probably except for Heidi, of course. She was kind of licking her wounds. So every once in a while in one of these productions, a character literally just cannot get a line. We will try everything. We'll try saying it and asking someone to repeat it exactly as we've said it. We'll try and explain the motivation for it, but every once in a while somebody just does not get that line. They don't understand it. They can't deliver it the way that we see it being delivered. So in Stab 6, that was Heidi. Heidi had a couple of lines that she just really struggled with. One of them was a question to Rachel. She was supposed to be asking her, did you finish the script? And she just could not get it out. And at one point, I actually ended up having to take one of Heidi's lines because she didn't understand it was supposed to not be a question, and she kept asking the question. I think she was trying to say like, lucky, that's what you got, but instead she kept saying, lucky? At the end, you see a showdown with Jeff's character, and you see, you know, Stephanie's character, Shannon, going back and forth with each other with the knife. And I think I said earlier, the only place that we were not allowed to get blood was in the kitchen because they had just remodeled the kitchen. And Karen was so nice about us using our house that we really wanted to respect that, so we put down tarps. What we didn't anticipate is that when you add blood to a tarp and you're standing on the tarp, you have no stability whatsoever. So it was the weirdest, most disturbing version of a slip and slide I have ever seen in my life. There's this part where we literally could not get them falling to the floor gracefully. They were supposed to stab each other back and forth and like slowly melt down to the floor. That was not possible on this tarp. The moment blood hit the tarp, you literally were slipping and sliding. So we had to film that scene so many times, and we really couldn't afford to, because once you have blood on your costume, you have blood on your costume. So we kept trying to film around the places they had already, you know, stained themselves with blood. So they're just stabbing each other, and they completely at one point just eat it. They absolutely eat it. They fall, they slip on the tarp, they have blood all over them, and we just kind of decided we needed to move on and that we had what we could get of that. So that was probably one of the funniest things. Not at the time, I would say it wasn't funny because we hadn't thought about it and it was frustrating, but now, like, seeing it back in your head, it was hysterical. In order to make sure that our stories can progress into the next Stab film, we knew that we needed to find a way to write in a way for us to get away with what we had done. So the idea was that we were going to scoop up the blood on ourselves and claim that we were victims that actually made it out alive, even though we were never in any real danger, but obviously the police don't know that. So I remember like getting in there. I scooped up huge scoops of blood. I had it all over my face. It was running down my chest. I ruined that bra. Maybe TMI, but it's absolutely true. That bra has never not been red again. I literally was soaked. Like, I looked like I had come out of like some weird horror festival, and Heidi just refused. Like, and she didn't openly refuse. She wasn't like, no, I'm not going to do that. She just would like take a little bit and just kind of like put it gently on herself. And I'd look over and I literally have blood splattered. It's all over me. And she's got like one little mark on her head, just kind of like making sure she still looks pretty. And we run out. And so I think that it's a funny contrast to see on film that I am completely covered in blood and she's claiming to be a victim but has like one little spot and still looks effortlessly gorgeous, you know, like the reporter she plays in the movie. So that was another funny thing. And I remember because it was hot that it was sticky, and I actually completely forgot this. I got pulled over on the way home, and it was a lady cop of Manchester. I don't remember her name, but she was the greatest. And she just kind of looked at me, and I looked at her, and some time passed, and then she was like, you know, where are you going? And I said, you know, I'm going home. And she asked me if I was okay, and then just kind of like stared at me after she asked. And I said, oh, I just filmed a horror movie. Like, I'm fine. Like, there's no puncture wounds. And she just hit the side of my door and said, okay, you have a good night, and let me go. But I remember thinking, I'm in trouble. Like, this is what it's gonna book me. She thinks I just committed some crazy murder. So that was a really funny story to have to tell, especially when I, you know, got home and had to tell Josh, like, by the way, you know how I looked when I left set? Yeah, I got pulled over. It's fine. So a funny scene in Stab 6 that I really enjoyed making and that there's funny stories from is the basement scene where some of the stoners decide to sneak down to the basement and smoke weed. And so you see Ashley's character Elise there, you see Nicole Linton's character Maria, and Chris Wilson, who plays Mike, all there, you know, just enjoying some smoking time together. And there's this one point where during Ashley's death scene, she has to push the killer, and the killer is actually Josh at this point. You know, he's playing the killer in the robe, and sort of like with the gusto that Donna pushes Ashley pushes Josh so hard he also gets air, and there's something hanging from the basement that hits his head and it cracks, and everybody hears that noise again, and again we have that moment of, oh my gosh, are you okay? And I don't know if to this day Josh has ever been the same. When we first worked with Ashley on Stab 6, it was a lot of fun. She brought so much life into her character. She was the comedic relief so many times that it was really enjoyable to watch. And with anything, not all good things, you know, stay good. But for Stab 6, it was really great to work with her. Stab 6 was a lot of fun. More lessons, obviously. Like I said, every movie we learn lessons from. And we had Karen, and Karen and Frank were great. They were behind the scenes. Even though Karen, you know, was an actress, she, long after she wasn't acting in our films, she really supported us. So shout out to Karen and Frank and everybody who made Stab 6 what it was. Hi, I'm Rachel Alexandria Arnold, and I play Rachel Alexandria Arnold in Stab 7 Knife of the Hunter. I also was assistant director and executive producer. So in Stab 7, Rachel's character is even stronger than in Stab 6. So in Stab 6, she's kind of finding herself. She knows that she wants to take over in, you know, where Josh left off. But in Stab 7, I think she realizes she doesn't just want to take over, she wants to make Stab her own, and, you know, really her own project and put her own ideas and thoughts into it. So in this movie, you really don't see Josh a lot. Josh is played by essentially himself, but as a ghost. And so he kind of acts as that little devil or angel on my shoulder. But other than that, it's basically my series to run with. And so I decide that I want to go back to our roots and pay homage to Stab 4 and reboot the Sarah Campbell idea. So this is the first time that we actually see us actively recruiting killers. It's kind of the next step up from devious to almost evil for Rachel, because in Stab 6, she's kind of letting chaos happen. So she's encouraging it, but she's not really creating havoc. And in Stab 7, she absolutely, you know, has decided that she's controlling this narrative. So she's the one recruiting killers to do her dirty work, basically. It's a really interesting thing to play. Again, not considering myself an actress, it's weird to see all the evolutions of my character and even myself, you know, personally throughout this. Stab 7 Knife of the Hunter was kind of the decline of projects. It's the first time that a project wasn't completed that we did. And we took a lot of flack for it, but as much flack as we took for it, it really kind of broke our own hearts. We had been working so hard on these movies, and so to have one be so damaged that it's, you know, irreparable was really heartbreaking. Unfortunately, in Stab 7, we had a main actress, Stephanie, quit. It was heartbreaking that she quit because, unlike, you know, some of the other characters where you can just replace them, Stab 6 really created Steph's character. Steph playing the Shannon character. The fans fell in love with her, rightfully so. She's wonderfully talented. And not only was the part so large, but like that whole, you can't come back from that. So we had to shut down production, and I remember how upset we were. I was, you know, kind of numb from everything because we put so much effort into it. I was living in Pennsylvania at the time and literally drove to New Hampshire to film all of my scenes in one day. And, you know, not only did I go up there, but Josh and Miriam and Layla, you know, their characters came down to film. My mom was in it. They drove to Pennsylvania to film, you know, that scene. And they didn't even stay the night. They literally drove 5 hours to do scenes and then drive 5 hours back. So all of this hard work had been put into it, and to get halfway through it and have it end was awful. So it was disheartening. We decided we were going to try again. Fortunately, that didn't work out either. It feels like a never-ending lane of life happening and things not getting finished now. Hopefully that's not the case with the Stab reboot, but that is, Stab 7 really started kind of the downward fall of, you know, our Stab Movies productions. Hi, I'm Rachel Alexandria Arnold. I was assistant director and executive producer of Stab 7, the second one, and I played Rachel Alexandria Arnold. We wanted some of the very same things for the Rachel character. We still wanted her to be taking over. We wanted her to start recruiting killers. We wanted her to take her own to have her own take on the Stab series. And so instead of like in Stab 7 Knife of the Hunter, where she's going back to her roots and rebooting the Sarah Campbell issue, in the new Stab 7, she's thinking of something new by introducing different killers. There's a nod to other horror movie franchises, but their play on Ghostface and how to make that function. We also get introduced in the new Stab 7 to competition for the first time. Rachel's running into not only having to fight for viewers because the Stab, show is out, but there's a Stab TV show killer that is competing with the killers that she's recruiting. So you kind of see that dynamic of her trying to figure out how to best herself and, her version of the Stab series without losing control, because the Stab TV show that she's not a part of is running at the same time. In this movie, we also couldn't finish. There were so many challenges. Mandy became pregnant, and obviously she was such a big part of the movie that we needed to wait for her, to give birth and be a mom to start again. And that meant that we had a whole year break in the middle. I was still living in Pennsylvania. I came up, I think, at 2 different points to film my scenes, once at a hotel room, once, with Josh. But then ultimately we realized that with that year break, people lost faith that we were ever coming back. And so we lost a ton of actors. Some of them had physically moved by the time we wanted to restart production or could restart production. Some of them decided that they no longer were committed to it. So even though it was hard to go through the first cancellation of Stab 7, it almost felt like, like a sick joke that the new Stab 7 was also getting shut down. And I remember talking with Josh and him saying, I don't want to make another movie that gets shut down. I don't want to do it. I'm done. And I don't think that I think personally, I don't think that moment was ever going to come, but it did. To see 2 things that you worked so hard for get shut down for things that are not within your control. The first time was heartbreaking. The second time was absolutely gutting. No pun intended. So I think that the reason it took so long for us to ever create anything again was 2 films back to back getting shut down after years of work. It really does do something to you. You start to lose hope and faith. Luckily we have some amazing fans that have stuck by us, and even though sometimes, because we were sad about it being shut down, even though they sometimes seemed a little annoying, being like, bring Stab movies back, we're like, yeah, I wish we could, like, we've been trying. You're really what made us want to do anything else. It's the reason that we thought of doing an original film. It's the reason that we're now thinking about doing a Stab reboot, is because you're so passionate about what we're doing, which still blows us away. Like, we feel like we're just kids doing an art project, like a film project. But you're there for us, so I appreciate it. And thank you for carrying us through probably one of the darkest times for us, because 2 films back to back getting canceled was crazy. So thank you. We also visited Fanticon. So we had been invited, Josh and I as Stab Movies had been invited to Fanticon before, and we weren't sure we were ever going to do another Fanticon, not because it wasn't a fun event, but it was so slow for us. I think maybe we went a little too early, and then, even though it was fun for us to see everybody else, not many people knew who we were. So it kind of felt like we put so much effort into preparing for this convention that the payoff really wasn't there. So we had kind of decided after that, even though we made new friends, there were, people next to us that did our hair and makeup that were there for that, that we, I still have them on my Facebook because they were such great people, but that really didn't pay off in the long run for Stab Movies to have to go back. But, a couple of years went by, and they actually reached out to us and said, it would be great if you ever filmed part of one of your movies at Fanticon, and we'll have you come out. That was a disaster, let me tell you. So they, made big promises that they were going to bring us out, because originally we had said, honestly, it wasn't something that made sense for us business-wise, because we do pay for everything out of our own pockets to do again. So they made these promises that, we were going to have, free reign to film during the convention and after hours, because we said, there's only so much we can film while an active convention's going on. We still have to, have some quiet and some access to things that people don't in order to make it work. And we were told that we were absolutely going to, be allowed to do that. And so we get there, we spend all this money to go, we rent our hotel room, we travel down there, we always make like merchandise to bring and sell when we go. So we put all that money into it. Josh and I probably signed 1 million pictures to get ready to hand out. Along with, taking our scripts, because now we're not just there as Stab Movies, we're there actually filming, and doing a production at the same time. And we get through the first day, we realize that there's nothing that we can really film while the convention's going on, but we were allowed to film at night. That's a promise that was made to us, so we were just gonna wait. We ran the convention as Stab Movies, and we were gonna worry about filming later. 20 minutes after the convention ended, security came and told us we needed to leave and that we weren't allowed to be there after hours. And literally everything we were filming was supposed to be after hours. We had to kill, the Kylie character. Heidi was becoming more and more unreliable. She wasn't responding. She didn't want to come back and do parts. So we realized we needed to kill her character off in a way that made sense. And we were going to do this at Fanticon. We weren't allowed to. We were going to kill her in a bathroom. At one point, Josh was actually going to stand in for her because she wouldn't come and do it and wear a wig, but we never even got that option. So we went down there, and after one day and the hassle, people telling us that we weren't, allowed to even run our movies because we were going to have to pay for a plug, which we didn't because we're not doing that. Come on. And not, getting anywhere. The second Fanticon that we went to, this one was far less organized. It was kind of all over the place. It was a new location. The people that were there, just weren't as exciting. They weren't bad. There weren't as many headliners because it was running, I believe it was running the same day as the Scarefest or FrightCon or whatever in New Jersey. And they had Jason. Like, obviously people are going to see Jason. You're not going to come to us. So it just was a disaster. And so we kind of had the rug pulled out from under us because all the plans that we made at their promises just never came through. And so, not that I want to speak badly about them, but we definitely will never be back to a Fanticon. We really were affected by that. And it's what started, the process. Even though we went there, it's another thing that contributed to the shutdown of yet another movies. Another thing that we ran into is because they were having this convention at the same time as a much larger convention in the same horror genre, a lot of the people that were supposed to go to this convention either decided not to go at all or decided to change and go to the other convention. And that affected us because somebody from The Walking Dead had actually agreed to be a cameo and be a security guard, but with them scheduling at the same time, his contract said he needed to go to the other one, so he wasn't going to be available to us. So we had to fill in, and somebody that we met the first Fanticon, his name's Ed, awesome man. He has a daughter that he's adopted. It's just wonderful, wonderful human. He heard that we were coming to Fanticon and actually came back, obviously not just for us, but he stopped by and we were able to catch him, and he on a whim agreed to be our security guard. And to this day, I'm still sad that the second Stab 7 never came out because he was so good and really saved us that I wanted that to be in a finished movie. So even though, Josh had words with security and we were able to film that scene of Ed replacing, the person from The Walking Dead as the security personnel, it just wasn't the same. We filmed, but it wasn't what we wanted to film because we still had constraints.